Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Around the House. Today, I'm going to teach you how to build and install a barn door in your house for under $100. As you can see, I've already installed the rail system, which is pretty simple to do. All you have to do is measure out your where your bolts are going to install into the wall. If you don't have any studs behind that, there are anchors included in the package. So you drill your hole and you set this little expander, and what that does is it brings the rail off the wall a little bit so your door doesn't hit against your wall, okay? And then you put your little stoppers on here and you're ready to start building your door. So the first thing you want to do when you're building the door is you want to get your measurements. You're going to want to get the roller. This is what's going to sit up here on the rail and roll back and forth with your door attached to it on the back side. You want to note that you want to take the measurement 2 inches above this hole. All of that information will be in the manual that comes with the rail kit. And I'll put everything I'm using today, I'll put in the description below. Then you want to measure down to this piece. This piece is going to keep the bottom of the door from going in and out. It's going to keep it on track, okay? What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to router a piece at the bottom all the way along the bottom of your door so that this fin sits inside of it. Okay, now that we have our measurements, let's go ahead and start assembling our door. If you're enjoying this video, please go ahead and hit the like and subscribe. It would really help us out. Now that you have your long boards cut to size, go ahead and lay them out. Get your measurement from side to side to cut your horizontal boards. Now that I have my horizontal pieces cut, I want to take my roller, and I've marked right there at 2 inches above that hole. And I want to see where my placement is going to be for this board. I don't want the bottom of my roller to stick off the bottom of my horizontal board. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring the bottom of the roller to the bottom of my horizontal board, and then I'm going to cut a piece to put right in here, just because I don't want to leave this piece open. Technically, I could leave it this way because I have this board underneath both holes, but when I look at it, I don't like the look because the bottom, this board has to be right up against the edge so that I can put that slot for the bottom rail. Now I have my top piece cut, and you can tell that there's a little bit of a green tint to some of this. These are pressure treated, and some of them have a little more of that green tint. So what I'm going to do before I start drilling any holes, I'm going to go ahead and sand these down a little bit and see if I can get them to more of a consistent color. Then we're going to start drilling the holes for our screws to attach the horizontal boards to the vertical boards. Now that I have everything sanded, I'm going to go ahead and mark where I want my screws to go into the vertical boards. Now that I have my holes marked, I'm going to take it into the drill press. I'm going to put the hole in it, and I'm going to countersink it so that the head of my screw sits down into this top board, and then I'm going to put some of the wood filler over it so that you don't see any of these screw heads. Now that we have our holes drilled and countersunk, it's time to put in the screws. I'm building this door with 1x6s, so I'm using 1 1/4 screws. And just for good measure, I usually go through with my manual screwdriver and just make sure that everything's nice and tight. There are several different designs for these barn doors. What we're going to do is we're going to put in 2 pieces of 1x4, one that goes at an angle here and one that goes at an angle here. The reason we're doing that is because the handle that we purchased for this door sticks over on both ends, and I don't want it to stick over on both ends. So when we put in that 1x4, it's going to take up some of this gap so that I can put this handle in properly where it has wood underneath both ends. So let's go ahead and do that now. Now we're going to go ahead and mark our 1x4, and now we'll go cut it. As you can see, the handle will fit nicely with these new pieces. So what I'm going to do now is sand these down because they are a little bit more green than the rest of my door. Sand those down, drill the holes, countersink them, and then we'll move on to the next step. Now that we have all of our screws in, let's go ahead and add our wood filler. And all we're going to do is put a little glob inside. Just like that. And then just kind of work it down in there. Just tap on it a little bit. Move it around. Get it to stick to the sides. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of these and let it dry overnight, and we'll come back tomorrow. We'll sand it down, we'll put some poly on it, and we'll put our rollers on, and then we'll stick it up and see how it looks. Now that we've let the wood filler dry overnight, we're going to go ahead and take our sponge sander. And real quick, if you don't have one of these sponge sanders, you really ought to pick one up. I'll put it in the description below, but these things come in really handy. So what we're going to do is we're just going to lightly go over this and we're going to flatten it out. It doesn't take a lot because it's just a filler. Just kind of go in a circular motion back and forth. You don't have to do too heavy-handed. You don't want to change the color of the wood around it too much. So at this point, you have many options for what you can do. You can stain this, you can lightly burn it, you can polyurethane it. In my case, I'm going to use the true wood and just put a little polyurethane on it. No matter which option you choose, whether you stain it or burn it, I would strongly recommend putting at least a coat of the polyurethane over the top of it, especially if you're going to use it in an application like I am, where I'm using it in the bathroom. So let's go ahead and I'm going to put the polyurethane on this side, and because it's a nice, beautiful, sunny day, I'm going to put 1 or 2 coats on it, let it dry, and then I'll flip it over and do the other side. Now I have 2 coats of the polyurethane on the back side. I'm going to take my sponge sander and I'm going to very, very lightly just go over the top. Now, if you've never worked with polyurethane before, that stuff is very, very sticky when it's wet. So unless you're in a clean room when you're applying, you're going to get little particles and things on top. Now I'm doing this outside, and as you can see, things are falling from the trees and stuff like that. So I'm just going to very lightly take this sponge sander, and I'm going to rough it just a little bit, and then I'm going to take my damp rag and just wipe over it. Now I'm going to flip it over and do the front side. Before I install the hardware, I want to take the door in and just double check the measurements, make sure everything is okay, and then I'll bring it back out and start putting the rollers and the handles on. Now, what I've done here is I've added a little piece of scrap underneath the door to give me a little bit of gap to the floor, and then I'm going to check and make sure that this roller, when it's on the rail, is going to hit right about where I want it to. And it does. That looks great. Now that I know everything is right, I'm going to go ahead and install it to my mark. If you need a little bit of gap either direction, either go up a little or down a little, I wouldn't go more than about a ½ inch. But you can fix that with this, okay? So let's go ahead and take this back out and install the rollers. Okay, the next step is going to be installing these rollers. Now I've already made my marks. I made my sides at 3 inches from the face, and then I came down 2 inches to the top of the hole, and I made my little marks for my holes. So when I set it in there, it's going to look just like that. And I had my mark that lines up with the top surface of my door. And so I'm going to go ahead and drill these holes and install the hardware. Okay, so it's important to mention that there are 2 sets of the bolts in the package, and one is for thicker doors and these are for thinner doors. I'm using the 1x6s, so I am going to be using the smaller bolts. We'll be using a 5/8 for the head of the bolt, and we'll be using 11/16 for the nut. Now let's go ahead and install our handle. Now let's install our backside handle. Now that we've traced our new handle onto the door, let's go ahead and router or chisel out the inside section to the depth of this inside part of the handle. Okay, now that we have our section cut out for our new handle, let's go ahead and set it in place and add our screws. We're down to one of our final steps. We're going to go ahead and cut a channel in here at the bottom of the door so that this piece will slide inside and keep the door from going away from the wall or towards the wall while you're opening and closing it. So let's go ahead and do that now. I'm going to use a router, and I'm probably going to make 2 or 3 passes to go through there. I want to get it to the depth of this little fin right here. Now it's not going to go all the way when we get it installed, but I want to do it so there's no friction against the top of this piece. After you get the bottom channel cut out, just take your little piece and slide it in there. Make sure there's nothing interfering with it sliding back and forth the entire length of the door. And now we can take this inside and install this piece along with the door. Now that we have our notch cut out of our door, I have put it in place, and I've put our little bracket in here so that I can line it up. I've made the gap here the same all the way up the door, and I'm using a 2x4 just to hold it in place so that I can adjust if needed. It looks pretty good, and I've made a little mark on the outside of my bracket right there. And now I'm going to remove the door, drill 2 holes so that we can secure the bracket to the floor. Okay, now we don't want to get it too tight. We want to be able to move it around just a little bit, just so that we can set it perfectly. Now let's set our door in place Now we have the little bracket in place. Looks like it's lining up well with the notch that we cut out. So now we can go ahead and tighten up. Now let's take a look at the cost of this barn door. We spent $42.99 on a hardware kit. We spent $45.43. That's $6.49 each for the 1x6x8s. We needed 7 of those. We spent $5.60 on a 1x4x8. And we splurged a little bit on the handle kit, but you can pick one of those up for $5.92 on Amazon, which I put a description in below. That's a total of $99.94. Now, this particular door is similar to a big box store that costs $268. So we saved over $168 on this door. All right, everyone, that's it. We got the door installed. It moves back and forth very smoothly. We got some fancy hardware in here. And we did it all by ourselves for under $100. So if you enjoyed this video, please take a second, reach down there and hit that like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye. Okay, now that we have our measurements,